Hello everyone, back again with movie and tune recap. Today, I'm going to explain an American supernatural horror film from 2014, titled Ouija. Spoilers ahead, so watch out and take care. The movie begins with two young girls, Laine and Debbie, playing with a Ouija board in Laine's room, and Debbie explains the rules of the board, emphasizing the most important one: never play alone. She also shows Laine how to use the planchette to see if there are any spirits nearby, and when Laine looks through the planchette, she is startled to see someone, but it turns out to be her younger sister, Sarah. Years later, a now grown-up Debbie is looking distressed, and after saying goodbye on a Ouija board, she throws it into a fire. Shortly after, Laine calls her from outside her house, inviting her to a school basketball game. However, Debbie declines, saying she wants to be alone. She also mentioned playing with the Ouija board, which made her feel strange, but Laine brushed it off as her overreacting. Later, while having dinner, Debbie notices her front door is mysteriously open, and moments later, the gas stove turns on by itself. After turning it off and dimming the kitchen lights, she goes to her room, and to her horror, she finds the Ouija board lying on her bed. Debbie picks up the planchette and looks through it, and suddenly, her eyes turn white, and in a trance-like state, she grabs some Christmas lights and hangs herself. The next morning, Laine is at a diner with her boyfriend, Trevor, when they are greeted by their waitress friend Isabella. As they chat, Laine receives a text from her dad, urgently asking her to come home. When she arrives, she finds her father, grandmother, and younger sister Sarah gathered to break the devastating news about Debbie's death. At Debbie's funeral, all her loved ones gather to mourn, and although shaken, Laine keeps her composure. Debbie's boyfriend, Pete, arrives with flowers, and after they share an embrace, Laine goes to Debbie's room, and there, her attention is drawn to Debbie's closet. When Debbie's mother enters, Laine breaks down and hugs her, and during their conversation, Debbie's mother asks Laine to house-sit while the family is away, which Laine agrees. The following day, Laine's dad leaves on a trip, and moment later, Laine and Trevor head to Debbie's house to house-sit. While Laine checks inside the house, Trevor goes to inspect the swimming pool cover in the backyard, and as Laine waters the plants, she hears strange noises coming from upstairs. Following the sound, she notices a flickering light in Debbie's room, and just as she reaches to turn it off, the flickering stops on its own. Feeling uneasy, Laine looks inside Debbie's closet and discovers the Ouija board Debbie had been using. Unable to shake the feeling that Debbie's spirit might still be in the house, Laine decides to gather Sarah, Trevor, and Isabella to return to Debbie's house and use the board to try and communicate with her. That night, the group gathers at Debbie's house, and while Laine goes upstairs to retrieve the Ouija board, the others are startled by Pete's sudden arrival. Once everyone is together, they sit around the dining room table. Laine places Debbie's photo on the table for a stronger connection, and they all place their hands on the planchette, reciting a mantra to begin the session. As the planchette starts to move, the group initially accuses Sarah of manipulating it, but she insists it isn't her. The spirit spells out "Hi friend," making them believe they are speaking to Debbie, and after Laine and Pete exchange emotional goodbyes to Debbie, the lights suddenly go out, which frighten everyone. Laine and Trevor go to the kitchen to check for the cause of the power outage and are shocked to see the stovetop burner turning on by itself. Meanwhile, Pete glances into a mirror and is horrified to see something lurking within, and suddenly, an unseen force shoves him, causing him to break the mirror. This terrifies the group, and they all decide to leave the house, and still determined to speak with Debbie, Laine takes the Ouija board home with her. The next day, Laine's grandmother, Nona, enters her room and notices the Ouija board, and when Laine returns home from school, Nona warns her to get rid of it immediately. However, strange events begin to haunt each of Laine's friends, and while on a bike ride, Trevor is lured under a bridge where he sees the words "Hi friend" written in chalk on the wall. After finishing her shift, Isabel notices the same phrase spelled out on the fogged window of her car, followed by a ghostly hand slamming against the glass. Pete encounters the words carved into his desk at home, and at Laine's house, she and Sarah discover the front door mysteriously open. Just then, it slams shut by itself, which terrify the sisters. They hide in a closet, and when Laine finally emerges, she finds the words "Hi friend" written on her laptop screen. Convinced that Debbie is trying to reach out to them, Laine gathers everyone to use the Ouija board again, and during their second seance, Laine asks the spirit for a sign. The planchette suddenly moves off the board, which frightened the group, and to their horror, they realize that they were never communicating with Debbie. Instead, they have contacted a malevolent spirit called DZ, someone Debbie had also reached out to in the past. The spirit spells out ominous messages, including "Run" and "Mother is coming." Looking through the planchette, Laine sees DZ with her mouth sewn shut, pointing at a terrifying woman with black eyes and a gaping mouth rushing toward her. Sarah begins to panic, believing that Debbie's death was caused by playing the Ouija board, and fearing they might be next. However, Laine reassures her that they will never use the board again. Through a series of videotapes, Laine learns a critical revelation: Debbie broke one of the cardinal rules of the Ouija board: never play alone. In the videos, Debbie also mentions finding the board in her attic, hinting at its sinister origins. That same night, Isabel is at home flossing her teeth and preparing for a bath, and suddenly, stitches form across her mouth. Her eyes turn white, and she is lifted into the air by an unseen force, and is violently dropped, slamming her head against the sink, which leads to her death. The next day at school, Laine tries to tell Trevor about Debbie's video diaries, but Trevor is furious. He blames Laine for forcing them to play the Ouija board, which he believes caused Isabel's death. Feeling helpless, Laine turns to Pete for help, and the two head to Debbie's house to investigate the attic where Debbie had found the Ouija board. While searching, Laine discovers a box of old photographs belonging to the previous residents, a woman and her two daughters, and among the items, Laine also finds a doll. She hands the box to Pete, but before Laine can leave the attic, she senses a disturbing presence. Later, Laine and Pete examine the photographs, which date back to the early 1950s. Pete looks up the address online and finds an article about a missing girl, Doris Zander, who disappeared in the house decades ago. The article reveals that Doris's mother was the prime suspect in her disappearance, and her sister, Paulina, was sent to a mental institution after killing their mother weeks later. Laine visits Paulina Zander at a mental asylum to uncover the truth about the sinister events surrounding the Ouija board and Debbie's house. Paulina explains her family's dark history. Their mother was a medium who used Doris as a vessel to communicate with the dead. Over time, their mother grew paranoid and convinced that the spirits were overtaking Doris, stitched her mouth shut to silence the spirits and ultimately killed her. Paulina tells Laine that Doris' body is hidden in a secret room in the house basement, and tells Laine that to stop the chaos, Doris' mouth must be unstitched to allow her to banish their mother's spirit. Laine and her friends return to the house to find Doris' body, and as they search, Trevor is attacked by a shadowy entity and becomes trapped in a room with Pete. Laine and Sarah continue their search and discover a hidden passage leading to a concealed room. Laine ventures inside while Sarah stays behind. In the concealed room, Laine finds Doris' decayed corpse with her mouth stitched shut. While Laine prepares to cut the stitches, Sarah is attacked by an unseen force. Just as Laine severs the stitches, Doris' mother's spirit appears to stop her, but the now free Doris' spirit unleashes a deafening scream, which vanquishes her mother's spirit. The group believes they've ended the haunting, but later that night, Pete returns home and becomes possessed by Doris' spirit. Doris forces him to take his own life, leaving the others in shock when they learn what happened. The next morning, troubled by the events, Laine revisits Paulina at the asylum to tell her that she followed her instructions. However, Paulina smiles and says Doris is now totally free, and Laine realizes that she lied, and that Doris' mother had been trying to stop the girls from causing harm with the spirits, which had taken over their lives. Paulina begins yelling that Laine will hear the voices too and is taken away by medics. Desperate to end the terror, Laine and Sarah turn to their grandmother for guidance, and she advised them that the only way to defeat the malevolent spirit is to destroy both the Ouija board and Doris' corpse. Meanwhile, Trevor receives a text from Laine, asking him to meet at Debbie's house, and upon his arrival, he is lured to the backyard pool by Doris' spirit, which takes the form of Sarah. There, Doris' spirit attacks Trevor and drowns him in the pool. Moments later, Laine and Sarah arrive at the house, but they can't find Trevor anywhere, and as they search for him, the sisters are horrified to discover his lifeless and soaked body. Frightened, the sisters rush to the basement to burn the Ouija board, and as they prepare to destroy it, Sarah is dragged into the hidden room by Doris' spirit. Inside the room, Doris attempts to sew Sarah's mouth shut to silence her forever, but Laine uses the Ouija board alone to lure Doris into playing. Doris grabs Laine's arm and begins to possess her, and as Laine begins to struggle, Debbie's spirit appears and helps her fight Doris' control. During the distraction, Sarah managed to throw Doris' body into the furnace, and Laine quickly tossed the Ouija board into the flames. Back home, relieved that the ordeal is over, Laine goes through pictures of her deceased friends, and afterward, she flosses her teeth and gets ready for bed. However, she finds the planchette on her desk, and the film ends with Laine looking through the planchette. Okay guys, that's all the recap about Ouija from 2014. Thanks for watching, see you again in the next video.